I feel confident because I'm the best player in the world.
For almost 2 decades, the NBA had an answer to a question that was almost impossible to argue with. Who runs this league? LeBron James. Not necessarily because he won every championship, not because he was the best player every single season, but because whenever the NBA needed a face, a headline, a villain, a hero, or simply someone to put on the front page, LeBron was there. And now, something very strange is happening. LeBron is still here, but the NBA is already starting to move on. After 23 seasons with the Cleveland Cavaliers, Miami Heat, and Los Angeles Lakers, LeBron has now joined the Philadelphia 76ers on a 2-year deal. And when he announced the move, he described it as his last decision after seriously considering retirement. Think about how crazy that sentence is. The player who has defined an entire generation of basketball is basically telling us that the end is finally somewhere on the horizon. But here's the problem. Nobody knows who takes his place, because this isn't like the old days. When Michael Jordan's career was winding down, Kobe Bryant was already becoming impossible to ignore. When Kobe's career ended, LeBron had already spent years establishing himself as the next global superstar. The torch had somewhere to go. This time, the torch is sitting in the middle of the court, and about 5 different players are reaching for it. And that's what makes the NBA's next era so fascinating. Because the league doesn't have a shortage of superstars, it has too many. Look at what happened during the 2025-26 season. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander won his 2nd consecutive MVP. Victor Wembanyama won Defensive Player of the Year, and the All-NBA first team featured Shai, Wembanyama, Luka Dončić, Nikola Jokić, and Cade Cunningham. That's an absurd amount of talent, and every one of those players has a legitimate argument for why they could become the next face of basketball. But here's where things get complicated, because being the best player in the NBA and being the face of the NBA are 2 completely different things. Nikola Jokić might have the strongest basketball resume of the entire group. Luka has the personality and global appeal. Shai is already stacking MVPs and winning at the highest level. Wembanyama might be the most unique basketball player we've ever seen. And Cade Cunningham just became part of that first-team conversation too. So who gets the crown? Well, that's the problem, because there isn't a clear answer. And to understand why that's such a big deal, we have to go back to the player who's still holding the crown, LeBron. For years, becoming the next face of the NBA seemed like a simple process. You became great, you won championships, you built a massive following, and eventually, the league started revolving around you. But now, the path isn't nearly that clear, because the players fighting for the future of the NBA aren't just different in their playing styles. They represent completely different versions of what a modern superstar can be. Start with Nikola Jokić. If this were purely a basketball question, Jokić might already have the answer. 3 MVPs, a championship, a finals MVP, and a style of basketball that somehow makes one of the greatest athletes on earth look like he's barely trying. Jokić doesn't need to dominate the conversation to dominate a game. He'll score, he'll rebound, he'll throw passes nobody else sees. And then, when the game is over, he'd probably rather talk about horses than basketball.
I have my horse racing in my
Horse racing? I was going to get to that.
And that's exactly why he might never become the traditional face of the NBA. Because being the face of the league requires more than being incredible on the court. It requires wanting the spotlight. And Jokić doesn't seem particularly interested in it. Then there's Luka Dončić. Luka is almost the opposite. He has the game. He has the personality. He has the highlights. And now, playing for the Los Angeles Lakers, he's on one of the biggest stages in American sports. Every incredible step back, every 40-point performance, every argument with a referee, every playoff moment becomes a story. Luka doesn't have to chase attention. Attention follows him. And if you're looking for someone who could inherit part of LeBron's global superstar role, Luka has one of the strongest cases. But then comes Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and this is where the conversation gets really interesting, because Shai isn't simply popular, he's winning. After winning his second consecutive MVP, Shai has already moved beyond the stage where people can call him a future superstar. He's here. He's already one of the faces of the league. And there's something else that makes his case different. He doesn't just produce highlights, he represents winning basketball. Oklahoma City has built around him, and the results have turned that young team into one of the NBA's biggest stories. So if you ask, who is the best player in the NBA right now? Shai has a legitimate answer. But once again, best player doesn't automatically mean face of the league. And then there's the player who might completely change what that phrase means. Victor Wembanyama. Wembanyama doesn't look like the next version of an existing superstar. He looks like something the NBA had to invent a new category for. He's 7'4". He can protect the rim like a traditional center, handle the ball like a guard, shoot from outside, move in transition, and create shots that simply shouldn't be available to someone his size. And now the awards are starting to catch up with the hype. Wembanyama won Defensive Player of the Year and made first-team All-NBA in 2025-26. That's happening incredibly early in his career, and unlike Jokić, Wembanyama seems to understand the larger stage. He embraces the attention, he understands the international spotlight, and most importantly, he's still getting better. That's what makes him terrifying for the rest of the league. Because Luka is already a superstar, Shai is already an MVP, Jokić is already an all-time great, but Wembanyama? We might not even know what his ceiling is yet. And that creates a completely different problem for the NBA, because now you have one player who may be the best basketball player alive, another who may be the biggest global star, another who is collecting MVPs, and another who could potentially become the most unique player basketball has ever seen. And we haven't even mentioned Anthony Edwards, or Cade Cunningham, or the next generation that's just beginning to arrive. So maybe the NBA isn't actually searching for its next LeBron. Maybe it's facing something much more complicated, a league where the crown no longer belongs to one player. And if that's true, then the real question isn't who is next, it's what happens when there is no clear next.
For the first time in nearly 2 decades, the NBA is heading toward a future where the answer might not be one name. And that changes everything. Because think about how the league has traditionally worked. Michael Jordan wasn't just the best player of his generation, he was the NBA's identity. Then came Kobe, then LeBron. Different players, different eras, but the transition always felt obvious. You knew who the league belonged to. Now look at the NBA today. Jokić has the resume, Luka has the global appeal, Shai has the MVPs and the winning. Wembanyama has the potential to become something we've never seen before. Anthony Edwards has the personality and the growing popularity. And behind them, players like Cade Cunningham and Cooper Flagg are already trying to push their way into the conversation. So the NBA has a strange problem. It doesn't have too few stars. It has too many possible faces. And honestly, that might be the best problem the league could have. Because maybe we've been looking at this the wrong way. Maybe the NBA doesn't need another player who completely takes over the league. Maybe the era of one superstar controlling the entire conversation is simply ending. And LeBron's latest move might be the clearest sign yet. Think about it. For years, LeBron's team was almost always part of the biggest NBA story. Cleveland, Miami, Los Angeles, championships, finals, free agency, trades, records, drama. Every decision mattered because LeBron was the story. Now he's heading to Philadelphia for what could be the final chapter of his career. And while everyone is still talking about LeBron, the next era is already happening around him. Shai is winning MVPs. Wembanyama is collecting major awards. Luka is wearing the Lakers jersey. Jokić is still doing things that barely make sense. And a younger generation is arriving before the previous one has even completely disappeared. That's something the NBA hasn't had to deal with for a very long time. An overlap between eras with no obvious successor. And that could completely change how the league sells itself. Because LeBron could sell a game by himself. People wanted to see LeBron. They wanted to love him. They wanted to hate him. They wanted to debate him. They wanted to know what he was going to do next. The next generation might be different. You might tune in to watch Wembanyama because you want to see something you've never seen before. You might watch Luka because you want to see whether he can take over another game. You might watch Shai because you want to see whether another MVP season is coming. You might watch Jokić because somehow, every night, he finds another way to make basketball look completely different. There isn't one story anymore. There are several. And that's exactly why the next few years could become one of the most unpredictable periods in NBA history. Because eventually, LeBron will walk away. And when that happens, the NBA won't suddenly become irrelevant. There will still be superstars. There will still be championships. There will still be rivalries. There will still be players capable of taking over the sport. But there may not be another LeBron. And maybe that's okay, because the next era doesn't need to copy the last one. Maybe the NBA's future isn't about finding the next king. Maybe it's about finding out which of these stars can build a kingdom of their own. Will it be Wembanyama, the impossible athlete who could redefine the position? Will it be Shai, the MVP who's already proving he can build a winning empire? Will it be Luka, the global superstar now carrying one of the biggest brands in basketball? Or will Jokić continue doing what he has always done, quietly becoming impossible to replace? We don't know yet, and for once, that's the exciting part, because for almost 20 years, the NBA knew exactly who ran the league. Now, the crown is sitting there, and nobody has claimed it. So when LeBron finally walks away, who runs the NBA?